I think I've covered the museum, and that's what I really wanted to do, and try to separate for you how the archives are different from the museum. And I could cackle on for a while longer, but are there any questions anybody might have?
I was just going to suggest that. Is there any questions for Bruce?
I got one.
Yes, Chris?
Just, if you can, Bruce, where do you think the build records accessibility is going to be now with such a limited staff?
Well, we're still doing it.
Right.
It just takes longer.
3 people, you're saying?
It just takes longer.
Yeah. All right.
And yeah, it just takes longer,
All right.
that's all. It used to be, we tried to figure for a 2 or 3 week turnaround, and now it's when Danielle, who does all the other stuff, she's the only female left in the office.
All right.
It's when she has a minute that she goes and pulls the bill
So
cards.
we're
Of
gonna
course,
be
we
going-
get $45 a piece for them, so
Yep.
it's important to keep that money flowing.
Okay, one of the news articles we saw out here in Australia about Chrysler and Fiat joining forces was that will we ever see a Fiat 500 Charger?
It's a weird thing. At this point, nobody really, at the time I left, and I came over here in December, at the time I left, I was not aware of the new product plan. I'm sure there is one. And my son, who's in the fastener lab, says that they're working their heads off on the new product plan, but I haven't heard what it is, so I don't know. I do know that they're going to continue the PT Cruiser. They had planned on dropping that, but they're going to continue it, and it may wind up with some smaller engines in it to get better fuel economy. Yeah.
Bruce, in regard to Fiat, why Fiat have a lot of money to put towards Chrysler, I'm talking as a diesel mechanic, is because 10 years ago they designed a common rail diesel system. Now there's two common rail, there's a common rail and there's electronic unit injectors. That's all designed by the Fiat engineers in Italy, and they patented it, and that's all now made under copyright and license from Bosch and Nippon Denso and whatever, and that's how come they got a lot of money. They're swimming in it.
Speaking of money, it's an interesting thing. I don't think I mentioned it. There was no money involved with this takeover by Fiat. They just took the company over without any money changing hands.
Well, whatever.
Under the decree by the federal government of the United States, who were loaning money to Chrysler, and that was the stipulation.
They picked up the debt. Exactly.
They've
Yeah.
covered the debt. You know.
There was one thing I did want to mention. Down here at the front is a picture, or pictures of a 1935 Dodge that some of you may have seen. I'm planning on taking it back to the States with me. I've made arrangements for a container and so on. But if anybody's interested in the car, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. It's a nice car. I think you've seen it, and Chip restored it, and it's available.
If there are no other questions? Yes, there is. Yes.
Is the Fiat Chrysler merger, does that revolve to the trucks as well, or are the trucks still owned by Daimler Chrysler?
No. Well, it
The
depends
reason why I
what...
ask is because we still have Daimler Chrysler trucks here in Australia, down at the corner of South and Grand Junction Road.
Well, those are different trucks. Those were never part of the Chrysler Corporation. The only trucks that Chrysler builds are Dodges, and they are part of the Fiat merger. Everything that Chrysler was building is part of the Fiat merger, but not those other Daimler Chrysler things.
Andrew?
The trucks you're referring to are actually actually called Sterlings, and Sterling took over Ford trucks back in the 90s. And that's the name of Chrysler something else. And I believe Fiat's owned by Iveco.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I believe Fiat is owned by Iveco.
Yeah, other way around. Fiat owns Iveco.
Fiat's something totally alien to me. I don't know. Yeah. Yes.
Just a question on how far back records go at in the archives. I've got a 20s Dodge, and I've heard that some records back then are missing or not available. Is that correct? So there's a block of records that aren't available? Like build records?
As you all know, Chrysler bought Dodge in 1928. The records in the archives before 1928 are sparse, but there are records. And we know exactly by, well, lots of people do, by the serial number of a Dodge, we can tell you what month it was built. That's about all we can tell you on those early Dodges. The build cards that we have start in 1930, and they go through roughly 1967 on cars, and they go through 1954 on trucks. And they're pretty good records.
You might like to just describe what a build card is. Some of you might have one.
Okay, there's a lot of confusion on build cards and build sheets. And the people who are into more modern automobiles than most of the ones we deal with here, there's a build sheet that was generated when the car was ordered. And it was a big thing, and it went with the car down the assembly line to help the people build the car. When the car reached the end of the line, this build sheet, which was generated at the manufacturing plant from the order from the dealer, that build sheet became useless because the car was built, and its only purpose was to get the car built. When it reached the end of the line, a build card, its birth certificate essentially, was made, and that's what we have at the archives, are the build cards. We have photocopies of them, the actual. But the build sheet, that's what these hot rod people just go crazy over. And they had no value to Chrysler or anybody within the corporation when the car was built, so they stuffed them under the front seat, they put them in the glove box, they put 10 in one car, and so on and so forth. And people will die for those, and there's people making phony ones. It's terrible, and they get a fortune for them. It's just awful. There's so many crooked things. If somebody tried to sell me a muscle car, if it wasn't my brother and we were on good terms, I wouldn't buy it. There's so many phonies out there that it's just unbelievable. And with the build cards that we have, we uncover some of the phony stuff. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting also. You talk about those build sheets. Many a time I've lifted a carpet out of a car, maybe a Commodore, maybe a Chrysler that was made here in Adelaide, and there on the floor, under the carpet, is a build sheet. And guess what? I screwed up and threw them away.
Sure.
Plenty of them.
Yeah.
And I think they still run it to this day, building Commodores or Holdens. I think they still run the same.
Yeah, I don't know.
Holden's run them too, and they actually had the price of each individual component as it went down the production line, and as they were disregarded. But when they went out to the people that bought them, they never ever actually seen that. If they had seen that, they'd have got a shock, because vehicles that come standard with a bomb on a roof or a radio, and you didn't want it, you could charge to remove it.
Oh, yeah.
You would charge to paint it.
Don't the Australian records over there at the museum?
Australian records in your museum?
That's a very sad story. I tried very hard to get the build records that did exist at one time at Chrysler Australia and then Mitsubishi. And one of the fellows who worked there, Ian Robiliard, became the government contact man. I've forgotten exactly what he did, but anyway, he was all involved in that kind of stuff. And I talked to him about trying to get those build cards over there. And he thought they existed, and he was working with MMC to have them put on film, which we were going to pay for, and then have them in the States so we could provide for Australians the same thing we do for the cars built in the United States. Ian tried for years to get these things, and finally, when they went to where they thought they were gone. And that was the last conversation I had with Ian. That goes back maybe a year or two ago. And They just don't exist, so there's nothing I can tell you about Australian-built cars. And I don't think that I'm sure they don't exist, because Ian did his level best. And I even did some conniving to get the money to do the thing, but anyway.
Okay, thank you so much, Bruce, for your presentation.